Amanda's hands trembled as she offered every penny she owned for the skeletal pregnant mare that experienced horsemen had deemed worthless and abandoned to certain death. The pitying stares burning into her back couldn't shake her resolve, even as she stood alone against a ruthless horse trader who would soon return with vengeance when he discovered what truly lay within the mare's swollen belly. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The air hung heavy with dust and the murmurs of cattlemen at the Riverdale livestock auction. Amanda Porter, a wisp of a girl at just 12 years old, stood on her tiptoes at the wooden fence, clutching a small wad of crumpled bills in her hand. Her blonde hair caught the morning sun as she peered through the slats, eyes fixed on the entrance to the auction ring. Today was the day she'd been saving for since spring, counting every penny from her egg-collecting business and the small allowance her grandfather gave her for helping with the farm chores. "They're bringing her in now," whispered Sarah, Amanda's best friend who had come for moral support. The girls watched as a ranch hand led a mare into the ring, a dun-colored horse with a swollen belly and dull eyes that spoke of weariness beyond her years. Amanda's heart caught in her throat. This was the horse she'd spotted 3 weeks ago when she'd accompanied her grandfather to look at some cattle. Back then, the mare had been tied to a post behind the auction office, head hanging low, ribs visible beneath her dusty coat. Something in the horse's gentle eyes had called to Amanda, a quiet dignity despite the neglect that was evident in her condition. "Lot number 157, announced the auctioneer, a portly man with a wide-brimmed hat and a voice that carried across the yard. 5-year-old quarter-horse mare in foal, owner says, about 7 months along. Some health issues, selling as is. Who'll start the bidding at $200? The crowd of men in their cowboy hats and worn jeans remained silent. Amanda scanned their faces, these men who normally competed fiercely for quality livestock. Today they studied their boots or gazed off into the distance, avoiding the auctioneer's probing eyes. Nobody wanted a sick, pregnant mare that might not even survive to deliver her foal. "Folks, this is a quarter horse with good bloodlines, just needs some care. How about $150? Can I get $150? The auctioneer's voice took on a note of desperation. Still nothing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Waste of time," Amanda heard someone say. "That horse won't last the winter." "100? The auctioneer wiped his brow. "Surely someone can use this animal for 100. Amanda looked down at the money in her hand, $87.53, every cent she had saved over the past 5 months. She had planned to bid on a healthy pony, something small and manageable that her grandfather might approve of. This mare was bigger than she'd planned, and clearly in need of veterinary care that would cost far more than her savings. "Going once for $100, going twice, $87.53, Amanda's voice rang out, high and clear across the auction yard. Heads turned, cowboys shifting to look at the small girl clutching the fence, her face flushed but determined. The auctioneer paused, his eyebrows rising as he spotted her. "Little lady, this isn't a petting zoo animal. This horse needs serious care." "I have $87.53, Amanda repeated firmly, "and I know how to take care of horses. My grandpa has taught me since I was 5. A chuckle rippled through the crowd, but it wasn't unkind. Amanda recognized Henry Wilson, their closest neighbor, as he stepped closer to the auctioneer and said something in a low voice. The auctioneer nodded slowly. "We have $87.53 from the young lady. Going once, going twice, sold to Amanda Porter for $87.53. Amanda's heart soared as Sarah squealed beside her. The mare lifted her head slightly as if she somehow understood that her fate had just changed, but Amanda's joy was short-lived as her grandfather's voice cut through the moment. "Amanda Rose Porter, what do you think you're doing?" Richard Porter's weathered face appeared above the crowd as he pushed his way toward his granddaughter. At 68, he still stood tall and straight, commanding respect from everyone in the county. "Grandpa, I bought her. She needs help and nobody else wanted her." Amanda stood her ground, though her voice trembled slightly. "Child, we can barely afford to feed the 2 horses we already have, and that mare." He glanced toward the auction ring where the horse still stood, looking lost and abandoned. "That mare might not even make it home, let alone deliver a healthy foal." "But Grandpa, they'll send her to the killers if nobody takes her." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I spent all my own money. I'll take care of her myself, I promise." Richard Porter looked from his granddaughter to the mare and back again. The determination in Amanda's eyes reminded him so much of her mother, his daughter who had died 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Amanda alone. That same stubborn will, that same compassion that sometimes defied common sense. "This isn't a stray kitten, Amanda. This is a 1,000-pound animal that needs medical care, special feed, and God knows what else. I'll work extra hours for Mr. Wilson. He said he could use help with his bookkeeping," Amanda pleaded. "And I'll collect more eggs and I can sell some of my toys." "Mr. Porter," Henry Wilson interrupted, stepping closer. "If I might say something, the girl's got a good heart, and she knows more about horses than most adults around here. My wife and I would be happy to help with some of the vet bills if needed. Call it a community project." Richard sighed deeply, looking around at the faces of his neighbors. He knew he was beaten. "You'll take full responsibility, Amanda? Feeding, grooming, mucking out stalls?" "Yes, sir. Every day, I promise." "And if the vet says she can't be saved?" Amanda swallowed hard. "Then I'll accept it. But at least she'll have been loved at the end." Something in her words seemed to reach her grandfather. His expression softened, and he nodded once, a short, decisive movement. "Henry, you mind helping us load her into our trailer? I don't think she'll walk up the ramp on her own." As the men moved toward the auction ring, Amanda slipped her small hand into her grandfather's calloused one. "Thank you, Grandpa. I love you." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're just like your mother, you know that? Never could turn away from something that needed help." Amanda smiled through her tears. "Is that a bad thing?" "No, child." Richard Porter looked toward the mare who would now be coming home with them. "It's what makes you who you are." Loading the mare proved challenging. She was weak and frightened, her legs trembling with each step. Amanda stood at the bottom of the trailer ramp, speaking softly, holding out a handful of oats that Sarah had run to get from their own trailer. "It's okay, girl. You're coming home with me now. I'm going to call you Hope because that's what we're not giving up on." The mare's ears flicked forward, and slowly, cautiously, she took a step toward Amanda, then another, until her soft muzzle reached out to take the oats from the girl's palm. As the mare carefully made her way into the trailer, Amanda felt a certainty settle in her heart. Whatever happened next, whether Hope survived or not, whether the foal came safely into the world or not, she had done the right thing. Some things were worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. And as Hope's gentle brown eyes met hers in the shadowy trailer, Amanda knew that this was one of those things. The ride home from the auction was tense and quiet. Amanda sat in the back seat of her grandfather's pickup truck, twisting around every few minutes to peek through the rear window at the trailer, where Hope swayed gently with the motion of the vehicle. Grandfather Porter's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his weathered face set in lines of concern that Amanda pretended not to notice. "Do you think Dr. Miller will come out today?" Amanda finally broke the silence, referring to the local veterinarian who had cared for their animals for as long as she could remember. "I already called him while you were getting the mare settled in the trailer," her grandfather replied, his voice gentler than she expected. He'll be at the farm within the hour after we arrive." Relief washed over Amanda. "Thank you, Grandpa." The truck turned onto the long, dusty driveway that led to the Porter family farm. It wasn't large by local standards, just 80 acres with a modest white farmhouse, a red barn that needed painting, and several outbuildings that had weathered decades of prairie winds. To Amanda, it was the whole world. She'd been born in that farmhouse, raised by her mother and grandfather after her father left when she was still a baby. After her mother's death from cancer 3 years ago, it had been just Amanda and her grandfather holding tight to each other and to the land that had sustained Porters for generations. As they pulled up to the barn, Sarah's mother was waiting in her car to collect her daughter. She stepped out as they parked, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "So this is the famous purchase," Mrs. Bennett said, walking over to peer into the trailer where Hope stood motionless, head hanging low. "Her name is Hope," Amanda announced, climbing down from the truck. "And she's going to be fine. She just needs someone to take care of her properly." Mrs. Bennett exchanged a glance with Richard Porter that Amanda pretended not to see. Adults always thought children didn't notice these looks, these silent conversations of doubt and worry. "Well, she's certainly lucky to have found you," Mrs. Bennett said diplomatically. "Sarah, honey, we need to get going. Your brother has soccer practice." Sarah hugged Amanda tightly. "Call me later and tell me everything Dr. Miller says," she whispered before following her mother to their car. Getting Hope out of the trailer proved easier than getting her in. The mare seemed to sense that she had arrived somewhere safe, stepping carefully down the ramp with Amanda leading her by a rope halter. In the daylight outside the auction barn, Hope's condition was even more apparent. Her dull coat was patchy in places, her hooves overgrown and cracked, and her swollen belly hung low beneath her protruding ribs. "Oh, Hope," Amanda murmured, stroking the mare's neck as she led her to the empty stall they had prepared. Fresh straw covered the floor, and a bucket of clean water waited beside a small portion of sweet-smelling hay. "This is your home now." Hope lowered her head to sniff the straw, then looked at Amanda with those soft brown eyes that had first captured the girl's heart. There was wariness there, but something else too. A flicker of curiosity, perhaps even trust. Dr. Miller arrived as Amanda was carefully brushing Hope's tangled mane. The veterinarian was a tall, lanky man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been caring for animals in the county for over 40 years and had delivered Amanda herself when a snowstorm had prevented her mother from reaching the hospital in time. "So this is our new patient," he said, setting his medical bag down outside the stall. "Your grandfather filled me in on the phone. Let's have a look at her." The examination was thorough and gentle. Dr. Miller spoke softly to Hope throughout, explaining to Amanda what he was checking and why. He listened to the mare's heart and lungs, examined her eyes and teeth, felt carefully along her swollen belly, and tested her legs and hooves. "Well?" Amanda asked anxiously, when he finally straightened up and removed his stethoscope. Dr. Miller's face was serious but not grim. "She's in rough shape, Amanda. Malnourished, anemic, and she's got a pretty bad case of worms that we'll need to treat carefully because of the foal. Her hooves need immediate attention. There's the beginning of an abscess on the left fore, and I'm concerned about her breathing. There might be the start of a respiratory infection." Amanda's heart sank with each word, but she squared her shoulders. "But you can help her, right?" "We can certainly try," Dr. Miller said, his voice kind. "She's young, and the fact that she's made it this far suggests she's a fighter. The foal complicates things. I'd estimate she's about 7 months along, which means we have a narrow window to improve her condition before she delivers." "What do we need to do?" Amanda asked. "I'll leave you with medication for the worms and the respiratory issues. She needs small, frequent meals of high-quality feed. I'll write down a specific regimen. I'll call Pete Jackson to come trim her hooves tomorrow, and we'll need to treat that abscess right away." He hesitated. "Amanda, I want to be honest with you. This is going to be expensive and time-consuming, and even with the best care, we may lose her, the foal, or both." "I understand," Amanda said firmly. "I've saved $87.53 so far, and I'm going to work for Mr. Wilson to earn more. Grandpa said he'd help too, and so did Mr. Wilson." Dr. Miller smiled, reaching out to ruffle Amanda's blonde hair. "You've got a good heart, kiddo. Let me talk to your grandfather about the costs. I think we might be able to work something out." As Dr. Miller left to find Richard Porter, Amanda turned back to Hope, who was cautiously nibbling at the hay. "See, we're going to make you better. You just need to stay strong." The next few days established a new routine at the Porter farm. Amanda woke before dawn to check on Hope and give her the first of 6 small meals. She carefully administered the medicines Dr. Miller had prescribed, mixing them into applesauce that Hope seemed to enjoy. Between school and chores, every spare moment was spent in the barn, brushing Hope's coat until it began to regain some shine, talking to her softly, or simply sitting in the straw beside her, reading homework assignments aloud as if the Mare might be interested in 7th grade history. Grandfather Porter watched his granddaughter's devotion with a mixture of concern and pride. He'd been skeptical, still was if he was honest with himself, but he couldn't deny the change in the Mare after just a few days of Amanda's care. Hope's eyes were brighter, her head held a little higher. When Amanda entered the barn, the horse would nickered softly in greeting, a sound that brought a smile to the girl's face that Richard Porter hadn't seen since before his daughter's illness. "You're something else, Amanda Rose," he said one evening, finding her asleep in the straw beside Hope, one small hand resting on the Mare's foreleg. Gently, he lifted his granddaughter, surprised at how light she still was despite the growing strength in her slender arms from all the physical work. As he carried her toward the house, Hope watched them go, her eyes reflecting the soft light from the barn lantern. Perhaps, Richard Porter thought, this hadn't been such a foolish purchase after all. As October gave way to November, the prairie winds grew colder, and the trees surrounding the Porter farm surrendered the last of their golden leaves. Amanda had established a careful ledger to track Hope's progress, marking small victories on the calendar in her neat, determined handwriting. Ate all her morning feed, walked around the paddock twice, whinnied when she saw me coming from the school bus. 2 weeks after the auction, Pete Jackson, the local farrier, had come to trim Hope's hooves and treat the abscess. Amanda had held Hope's lead rope, murmuring encouragement as the mare trembled through the procedure. "You've got a good touch with her," Pete had commented, watching Amanda stroke Hope's neck. "Most horses with her background would be impossible to handle by now." "What do you mean, her background?" Amanda had asked, curious about Hope's past. Pete had hesitated, glancing toward the house where Richard Porter was fixing a broken porch step. "Well, from the looks of her hooves and the way she flinches when you raise your hand too quick, I'd say she wasn't treated kindly wherever she came from." The thought had made Amanda's chest tight with anger. How could anyone mistreat such a gentle creature? The idea that someone had been cruel to Hope only strengthened her resolve to make the mare's future better than her past. Today marked 1 month since Hope had come to live at the Porter farm, and Amanda was celebrating by taking the mare, for her first real walk, beyond the small paddock adjacent to the barn. Dr. Miller had visited yesterday and pronounced Hope's progress remarkable, though he'd cautioned that the final weeks of pregnancy would be the most critical. "Good morning, beautiful," Amanda called as she entered the barn, carrying a small basket of carrots she'd purchased with her first payment from helping Mr. Wilson organize his business receipts. The arrangement had worked out well. 3 afternoons a week after school, Amanda would walk the half-mile to the Wilson place and spend 2 hours sorting paperwork that the busy rancher never seemed to have time for. Hope's head appeared over the stall door, ears pricked forward in greeting. The transformation in the mare was striking. Her coat, though still patchy in places, had regained a healthy sheen. Her eyes were bright and alert, and her belly had rounded properly, the foal within growing stronger with each passing day. "Ready for an adventure?" Amanda asked, offering a carrot that Hope delicately lipped from her palm. "Grandpa said we could walk down to the creek today." Amanda had carefully groomed Hope that morning, braiding colorful ribbons into her mane, a touch that her grandfather had rolled his eyes at but hadn't commented on. Leading the mare out of the barn, Amanda felt a surge of pride at how far they'd come. Hope still moved with caution, but the painful limp from the abscess was gone, and there was a new confidence in her step. "Don't go beyond the creek," Grandfather Porter called from the workshop where he was repairing a tractor, "and be back before lunch. There's weather coming in." Amanda waved acknowledgement, checking the sky where clouds were indeed gathering on the western horizon. "We won't be long," she promised both to her grandfather and to Hope. The path to the creek wound through a small apple orchard, past the chicken coop where Amanda collected eggs each morning, and down a gentle slope covered in dried prairie grass that rustled in the breeze. Hope walked beside Amanda without pulling on the lead rope, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting scents or to pluck at tufts of grass that still showed green at their base. At the creek, Amanda let Hope drink from the clear, shallow water. The mare's reflection showed how much she had improved. No longer the skeleton covered in dull hide, but a horse regaining her dignity and strength. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Amanda told her, placing a hand on Hope's swollen side. She was rewarded with a sudden movement beneath her palm, the foal kicking vigorously against the mare's flank. "Oh, did you feel that? Your baby's saying hello." Hope turned her head to look at Amanda, then nudged the girl's shoulder gently with her muzzle, a gesture of affection that made Amanda's heart swell. These moments of connection had been coming more frequently as Hope learned to trust, each one a precious gift that Amanda treasured. They stayed by the creek for nearly an hour, Amanda sitting on a fallen log while Hope grazed nearby. The mare seemed to enjoy the outing, her ears constantly moving, taking in the sounds of birds and the gentle babble of water over stones. When the wind picked up, bringing with it the first cold drops of rain, Amanda reluctantly tugged on the lead rope. "Time to head back, girl. We don't want you catching a chill." They had just reached the edge of the orchard when the sky opened up in earnest, rain pouring down in heavy sheets. Amanda, concerned for Hope's health, unzipped her own jacket and attempted to drape it over the mare's back, standing on tiptoe to reach. The sudden movement above her head startled Hope. With a frightened snort, she reared up, pulling the lead rope from Amanda's unprepared grasp. The mare backed away, eyes wide with panic, then turned and bolted through the orchard, disappearing into the curtain of rain. "Hope," Amanda cried, her voice nearly lost in the downpour. "Hope, come back." Heart pounding, Amanda ran after the mare, slipping in the mud and struggling to see through the rain streaming down her face. She couldn't lose Hope now, not after everything they'd been through, not with the foal so close to being born. If Hope injured herself, running in panic. Amanda found the mare at the far end of the orchard, trembling beneath an ancient apple tree, her lead rope tangled in the lower branches. Hope's sides heaved with exertion and fear, her eyes rolling to show the whites. "It's okay," Amanda said, approaching slowly with her hand outstretched. "I'm sorry I scared you. Everything's okay." Hope's nostrils flared as she caught Amanda's scent, recognition gradually replacing panic in her expressive eyes. The mare remained tense, but allowed Amanda to come close enough to untangle the lead rope. "That's my brave girl," Amanda soothed, stroking Hope's wet neck. "Let's get you home and dry." By the time they reached the barn, both were soaked to the skin. Grandfather Porter was waiting for them, his face creased with worry that melted into relief when he saw them. "Got caught in it, did you?" he asked, taking the lead rope from Amanda's cold fingers. "Go on into the house and change. I'll get Hope settled." "But," Amanda began to protest. "No arguments. You're shivering fit to shake apart." "I can dry off a horse," Amanda rose. "Been doing it since before you were born." To Amanda's surprise, Hope followed her grandfather willingly into the barn, without the hesitation she usually showed around anyone but Amanda. Perhaps the mare had finally accepted that she was truly safe here, that not all humans would hurt her. Watching them from the barn doorway, Amanda felt a warmth that defied the chill of her wet clothes. The bond she had formed with Hope was special, but seeing the mare begin to trust others gave her a different kind of joy. It meant Hope was healing, not just in body, but in spirit. Later, dressed in dry clothes and sipping hot chocolate at the kitchen table, Amanda gazed out the window at the rain still coming down in sheets. She got spooked, she told her grandfather, who was making soup on the stove. "I think I moved too suddenly with my jacket." Richard Porter nodded thoughtfully. "Horses don't forget, Amanda, especially the bad things, but they can learn to trust again, with time and patience." He stirred the soup slowly. "Your mother would be proud of what you're doing for that mare." Amanda smiled, warming her hands around the mug. Outside, the storm raged, but in her heart, there was only sunshine. December arrived with a fierce cold snap that transformed the landscape into a glittering frozen world. Amanda's 12th birthday came and went with little fanfare, a small celebration with grandfather Sarah and the Wilsons, who surprised her with a beautiful hand-tooled leather halter for Hope, complete with a brass nameplate. "For when she's ready to be shown," Mrs. Wilson had explained, smiling at Amanda's speechless gratitude. The thought of showing Hope someday seemed like an impossible dream, but Amanda tucked it away in her heart, another goal to work toward. For now, though, the focus remained on keeping Hope healthy as her pregnancy progressed into its final stages. Dr. Miller visited weekly now, each examination more thorough than the last. "The foal is positioned correctly," he announced during his most recent visit, his hands carefully palpating Hope's swollen sides. "And Mama's vital signs are good. I'd estimate we're looking at another 3 to 4 weeks, probably right after Christmas." "Will you be here when she delivers?" Amanda asked anxiously, stroking Hope's forehead as the mare stood patiently through the examination. "I'll do my best," Dr. Miller promised, "but horses don't always follow our schedules. You should be prepared to handle things if I can't get here in time." He spent the next hour teaching Amanda and her grandfather what signs to watch for, what supplies to have ready, and what to do if complications arose. The responsibility weighed heavily on Amanda, but she tackled it with the same determination she'd shown from the beginning. She read every book on horse breeding she could find, bombarded Dr. Miller with questions during his visits, and spent hours sitting in Hope's stall, talking to the mare about the coming foal. "I wonder what color it will be," she mused one afternoon, her back against the stall wall, a notebook open on her lap where she'd been sketching Hope's profile. "Maybe a buckskin like you, or perhaps something completely different. I guess we won't know who the father was." Hope, comfortable with Amanda's presence, continued munching her hay, occasionally nudging the girl's shoulder as if to say she was listening. School had become a trial of patience for Amanda, each day seeming to drag on endlessly when all she wanted was to be back at the farm with Hope. Her teacher, Ms. Reynolds, had noticed her distraction. "I understand you have a special project at home," Ms. Reynolds said after asking Amanda to stay behind after class one day. "Sarah's been telling everyone about the mare you rescued." Amanda nodded, surprised that her quiet friend had been talking about Hope. "I thought you might be interested in turning this into your science project for the year," Ms. Reynolds continued, handing Amanda a folder. Documenting the mare's recovery and the birth of the foal would make an excellent study in animal husbandry. The idea was perfect. Now Amanda could justify all the time spent with Hope as educational, and she threw herself into the project with renewed enthusiasm. She created detailed charts tracking Hope's weight gain, diet, and vital signs. She took photographs documenting the mare's physical transformation and kept a daily journal of behavioral observations. One evening, 2 weeks before Christmas, Amanda was completing her homework at the kitchen table when the phone rang. Grandfather Porter answered it, his expression growing serious as he listened to the caller. "I see. Yes, that is concerning." He glanced at Amanda, who had stopped writing to watch him. "Thank you for letting us know. We'll keep an eye out." "What's wrong?" Amanda asked as soon as he hung up. Grandfather Porter sat down heavily across from her. "That was Sheriff Davis. There's been a report filed by a man named Harlan Griggs claiming that a horse stolen from his property has been spotted in this area, a pregnant mare." Amanda's blood ran cold. "Hope? Someone's saying Hope was stolen. He's not naming our mare specifically, but the description matches. Dun quarter horse in foal." Her grandfather's weathered face was troubled. "Sheriff said this Griggs fellow is from 3 counties over, claims the horse disappeared from his property in late September. That's when Hope was at the auction," Amanda protested. "Grandpa, you don't think—" "I don't know what to think," Amanda rose. He sighed deeply. "Sheriff said there's no formal investigation yet, just that they're following up on the report. He wanted to give us a heads up since we'd recently acquired a mare matching that description. But we have papers from the auction. They wouldn't have sold her if she was stolen." Even as she said it, Amanda knew that wasn't necessarily true. The rural auction where they'd found Hope wasn't known for its rigorous documentation. "We'll sort it out," her grandfather assured her, though the worry lines around his eyes deepened. "Don't borrow trouble. For now, nothing changes." But everything had changed. That night, Amanda lay awake long after she should have been sleeping, her mind racing with terrible scenarios. What if someone came to take Hope away? What if this man, this Harlan Griggs, was the one who had mistreated her in the first place? The thought of Hope returning to a place where she had been neglected or abused was unbearable. The next morning, Amanda went straight to the barn before breakfast, needing to reassure herself that Hope was still there, still safe. The mare greeted her with a soft nicker, her brown eyes peaceful, unaware of the potential threat looming over her newfound security. "I won't let anyone take you," Amanda whispered fiercely, wrapping her arms around Hope's neck. "I promise." At school that day, Amanda could barely concentrate. During lunch, she confided her fears to Sarah, who listened with wide eyes. "My dad knows people," Sarah offered after Amanda finished explaining. "He could ask around about this Griggs person." "Would he?" Amanda asked, hope flaring in her chest. "I'll ask him tonight," Sarah promised. The next few days passed in a state of tense vigilance. Amanda found herself jumping at every unexpected sound, rushing to the barn whenever a car came up the driveway. Grandfather Porter said nothing about her behavior, but she caught him watching her with concern in his eyes. On Friday afternoon, Sarah's father stopped by the farm. Mr. Bennett was a quiet, thoughtful man who worked as the bank manager in town and seemed to know everyone in 3 counties. "Richard," he greeted Grandfather Porter with a handshake. "Amanda, got a minute to talk?" They gathered in the kitchen, where Mrs. Wilson had dropped off a fresh apple pie the day before. As Grandfather Porter cut slices, Mr. Bennett cleared his throat. "I've been asking around about Harlan Griggs," he began, nodding thanks as a piece of pie was placed before him. "Thought you should know what I found out." Amanda sat very still, her own pie untouched, as Mr. Bennett shared what he had learned. Harlan Griggs had a reputation as a difficult man who had been investigated twice for animal neglect, though no charges were ever filed. He ran a small-time breeding operation that was rumored to cut corners on veterinary care and proper feeding. Most telling, Mr. Bennett continued, is that according to my cousin who works at the livestock board, Griggs sold 8 horses at various auctions in September, including a pregnant mare that matches Hope's description, sold, not stolen. Relief flooded through Amanda so intensely that she felt lightheaded. So he's lying about Hope being stolen? Seems that way. Mr. Bennett nodded. My guess is he heard through the grapevine that the mare he discarded is doing well and might produce a valuable foal. Now he wants her back. Can he do that? Amanda asked, her voice small. Not legally, no. You have a bill of sale and we have proof he sold her at auction. But Mr. Bennett's expression grew serious. He might make trouble anyway. Men like Griggs often do. The week before Christmas brought heavy snowfall that blanketed the Porter farm in pristine white. Under normal circumstances, Amanda would have reveled in the beauty of it, the way the sunrise painted the snow-covered fields in shades of pink and gold, the cardinal that visited the bird feeder outside the kitchen window, the perfect stillness of winter mornings. But the shadow of Harlan Griggs' claim hung over everything, tainting even the most beautiful moments with worry. You're going to wear a path in that floor, Grandfather Porter commented mildly one evening as Amanda paced the living room, pausing every few turns to glance out the window toward the barn, where lights glowed softly in the darkness. I can't help it, Amanda admitted, finally sinking into the armchair across from her grandfather. What if he just shows up and tries to take her? Richard Porter set aside the harness he was mending. Amanda rose. We've discussed this. Hope is legally yours. You have the bill of sale, and thanks to John Bennett, we have proof that Griggs sold her at auction. Sheriff Davis is aware of the situation. But what if? You can't live your life in what-ifs, her grandfather interrupted gently. Your mother used to say that worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Amanda smiled faintly at the mention of her mother. I miss her. I know you do, sweetheart. I do too. He reached across to pat her hand. She would be so proud of what you've done with Hope. That mare wouldn't be alive today if not for you. I just want her to be safe, Amanda whispered. Her and the foal. And they will be, Grandfather Porter promised. Now, how about you help me string some lights on that sorry excuse for a Christmas tree before we both fall asleep in our chairs? The distraction worked for a while. They decorated the small pine tree that Grandfather had cut from their own land, hanging the ornaments that Amanda's mother had collected over the years. Each one held a memory: the ceramic star she had made in kindergarten, the glass ball with her mother's name painted in glitter, the tiny silver horse that seemed especially significant this year. Later that night, after her grandfather had gone to bed, Amanda slipped out to the barn for one last check on Hope. The mare was resting comfortably in her stall, her breath creating small clouds in the cold air. Amanda sat beside her for a long time, finding peace in the rhythmic sound of Hope's breathing and the occasional shifting of her hooves in the straw. Nobody's going to take you away, she promised softly, stroking Hope's neck. You're home now. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Amanda woke early, as always, to tend to Hope before breakfast. The mare seemed restless, pacing her stall and repeatedly turning to look at her swollen sides. Is something wrong, girl? Amanda asked, concerned. She placed a hand on Hope's flank and felt a strong ripple move beneath the skin, the foal shifting position. According to Dr. Miller's latest estimate, they still had at least a week before the birth, but Amanda made a mental note to call him after breakfast, just to be safe. When she returned to the house, delicious smells greeted her: pancakes, bacon, and the cinnamon rolls that were a Porter Christmas tradition. Grandfather stood at the stove wearing the apron that had been her grandmother's, spatula in hand. "Merry Christmas, Amanda Rose," he said, smiling at her over his shoulder. "Hope doing all right this morning?" "She seems a little restless," Amanda replied, washing her hands at the sink. "I think I should call Dr. Miller after breakfast." "Already did," her grandfather said, surprising her. "I noticed the same thing when I checked on her before you woke up. He said he'd stop by around noon just to be safe." Amanda felt a rush of gratitude. Despite his initial reluctance, her grandfather had become almost as invested in Hope's welfare as she was. Breakfast was a cheerful affair, followed by the exchange of gifts, practical ones, as was the Porter way. Amanda received new winter boots, books about horse breeding, and a beautiful handmade quilt that her grandfather had secretly commissioned from Mrs. Wilson, featuring horses running across a prairie landscape. Her gift to him was a framed photograph of 3 generations of Porters, her grandparents, her mother, and herself, that she had found while cleaning the attic and had restored with Sarah's help. "It's perfect," he said gruffly, blinking rapidly as he studied the image. Their quiet celebration was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle coming up the driveway, Dr. Miller arriving earlier than expected. Amanda hurried to the door, but the truck that pulled up wasn't the veterinarian's familiar blue pickup. Instead, a battered black truck with rusty fenders stopped beside the barn, and a tall, angular man in a worn cowboy hat stepped out. "Grandpa," Amanda called, her voice tight with alarm. Richard Porter appeared beside her, his expression hardening as he took in the visitor. "Stay inside," he instructed, reaching for his coat. "No," Amanda protested. "If this is about Hope, I'm coming too." Her grandfather hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay behind me." They stepped out onto the porch together as the stranger approached. Up close, Harlan Griggs, for Amanda was certain this must be him, was even more intimidating. Tall and gaunt, with deep-set eyes and a mouth set in a permanent downward curve, he carried himself with the coiled tension of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Porter," he said, his voice a raspy drawl. "Harlan Griggs, I believe you have something that belongs to me." Grandfather Porter stood straight and solid, a barrier between Griggs and Amanda. "Mr. Griggs, I understand you've been making some claims about a horse my granddaughter purchased legally at auction." Griggs spat to one side, a gesture so deliberately disrespectful that Amanda felt anger rise in her chest. "That mare was stolen from my property. Worth a good bit to me, especially with the foal she's carrying." "That's not true," Amanda blurted out, unable to contain herself. "You sold her at auction because she was sick and you didn't want to pay for her care." Griggs' cold eyes shifted to Amanda, taking in her slight frame and determined expression with a dismissive glance. "Little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. That's my breeding stock, and I want her back. Now." "Mr. Griggs." Grandfather Porter's voice remained calm, but carried an undertone of steel. "We have documentation proving you sold the mare at auction. We also have witnesses who can testify to her condition when my granddaughter purchased her, a condition that clearly indicated neglect." "You threatening me, old man?" Griggs took a step closer, his hand resting ostentatiously on his belt buckle. "Simply stating facts," Grandfather replied, not backing down. "Sheriff Davis is aware of the situation, as is the County Livestock Board. If you wish to pursue this matter, I suggest you do so through legal channels. In the meantime, I'll ask you to leave our property." For a tense moment, Griggs stood unmoving, his gaze shifting between Grandfather Porter and Amanda. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent a chill down Amanda's spine. "You know what? Keep the nag," he said with a sudden indifference that seemed forced. "Not worth the trouble. But that foal, that's different, half mine by rights, carrying bloodlines that mean something. We'll be talking again once it's born." With that parting threat hanging in the air, he turned and walked back to his truck. Amanda watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. "Grandpa," she whispered as the truck disappeared down the driveway. What did he mean about the Foles bloodlines? Richard Porter shook his head slowly, his eyes still fixed on the empty driveway. "I don't know," Amanda rose, "but I think it's time we learned more about where Hope came from." Dr. Miller arrived shortly after Griggs's departure, finding Amanda and her grandfather still standing on the porch, their faces taut with concern. Sensing the tension, the veterinarian asked what had happened, and as they walked to the barn, Grandfather Porter explained about their unwelcome visitor. "Harlan Griggs," Dr. Miller repeated, his usual cheerful expression darkening. "I know him by reputation. None of it good." "He said something about the Foles bloodlines," Amanda said, leading the way to Hope's stall. "That they mean something. What could that mean?" Dr. Miller's eyebrows rose as he considered this. "Hard to say without knowing the stallion involved. But if Griggs is interested enough to come all this way, there might be more to your Hope than meets the eye." Inside the stall, Hope greeted them with a soft nicker. She seemed calmer than she had been earlier, but Dr. Miller performed a thorough examination anyway, paying special attention to her vital signs and the position of the foal. "No imminent signs of labor," he concluded finally, straightening up from his crouched position. "But she's definitely getting close. The foal has dropped into position. Could be days, could be hours." "Will you stay?" Amanda asked anxiously, remembering Griggs's threat. "I've got other calls to make," Dr. Miller said apologetically, "but I'll check back this evening. In the meantime, keep an eye on her. First-time mares can be unpredictable." After the veterinarian left, Amanda settled on a bale of hay outside Hope's stall, unwilling to leave the mare alone after the morning's events. Grandfather Porter brought her lunch and a thermos of hot chocolate, along with the new horse books she'd received for Christmas. "I called John Bennett," he told her as he handed over the sandwich. "He's making some inquiries about Griggs's breeding operation, and Sheriff Davis will be increasing patrols past our place for the next few days, just as a precaution." "Thank you, Grandpa," Amanda said, some of the tightness in her chest easing. She wasn't alone in this. She had her grandfather, the Bennetts, the Wilsons, Dr. Miller, a community of people who cared. The afternoon passed quietly. Amanda read from her new books, occasionally reading interesting passages aloud to Hope, who listened with twitching ears, as if understanding every word. By evening, there was still no change in the mare's condition, and Amanda reluctantly allowed herself to be coaxed back to the house for dinner. "You'll wear yourself out at this rate," Grandfather Porter said as they washed the dishes together afterward. "Hope's doing fine. The barn is warm, she has water and hay, and the security light is on. You need to rest too." Logically, Amanda knew he was right, but her heart pulled her back to the barn. "Just one more check," she promised. "Then I'll come right back and go to bed." The night air was crisp and clear as she made her way across the yard, stars glittering overhead in a black velvet sky. Fresh snow crunched beneath her boots, and her breath formed clouds in the stillness. The barn welcomed her with familiar smells: hay, horses, the sweet earthiness of clean straw. Hope was standing in her stall, head low, sides heaving slightly. Something about her posture made Amanda pause, a flutter of instinctive concern rising in her chest. She moved closer, speaking softly to avoid startling the mare. "Hope? You okay, girl?" In the overhead light, Amanda could see that Hope's coat was damp with sweat despite the cool temperature in the barn. The mare turned her head slowly to look at Amanda, her brown eyes wide, nostrils flared. As Amanda watched, Hope shifted her weight uncomfortably, then lowered herself carefully to the straw, rolling slightly to one side. Amanda's heart leaped into her throat. She'd read enough to recognize the signs. Hope was in labor. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. She should run back to the house, call Dr. Miller, wake her grandfather. But something in Hope's eyes held her in place. A silent plea not to be left alone. Making a quick decision, Amanda pulled her cell phone from her pocket and sent a brief text to her grandfather. Hope in labor. Calling Dr. Miller now. The veterinarian answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Amanda, everything all right? Hope's in labor, Amanda said, struggling to keep her voice steady. She's lying down and she's sweating and she keeps looking at her sides. How far apart are the contractions? Dr. Miller asked, sounding more alert now. Amanda watched as Hope's sides tensed visibly, the mare grunting softly with the effort. Maybe 5 minutes? I just got here, so I'm not sure. That's early labor. You've got time, Dr. Miller assured her. I'm about 40 minutes away. Is your grandfather there? He's in the house. I texted him. Good, get him to help you prepare. Remember what we discussed. Clean straw, warm water, towels. Keep the barn quiet and dimly lit. Hope knows what to do. Your job is to make her comfortable and watch for any problems. By the time Amanda ended the call, Grandfather Porter was hurrying across the yard, carrying the foaling kit they had prepared weeks ago. Together, they freshened Hope's stall with clean straw, filled buckets with warm water, and laid out the towels and other supplies Dr. Miller had recommended. You've studied for this, Grandfather reminded Amanda gently as they worked. Trust yourself. Hope labored steadily through the next hour, her contractions gradually increasing in frequency and intensity. Amanda sat beside her, stroking her neck and speaking softly, offering encouragement as the mare pushed. Grandfather Porter remained nearby, a steady, calming presence. Just as the clock in the barn struck 10, Hope's water broke, the fluid rushing onto the straw. The mare heaved herself upright, standing with legs braced wide, her sides rippling with powerful contractions. This is it, Grandfather Porter said quietly. The foal's coming now. Amanda's mouth went dry as she watched Hope strain, the first glimpse of the amniotic sac appearing beneath her tail. Inside, she could make out tiny hooves, perfectly formed, pointing downward as they should be. Front feet first, good, she whispered, remembering her reading. That's normal. The next contraction brought the foal's nose into view, resting atop the legs, exactly the right position. Hope was doing everything perfectly, her instincts guiding her through the ancient process. With each push, more of the foal emerged until finally, with a tremendous effort, Hope delivered the shoulders, and the rest of the foal slipped free onto the waiting straw. A filly, Amanda cried, tears streaming down her face as she saw the tiny form still enclosed in the birth sac. Grandpa, it's a filly. Hope turned immediately, her maternal instincts taking over as she began to lick the membrane away from her foal's face, clearing the airways. Amanda stepped forward to help, gently breaking the sac around the filly's nostrils, making sure she could breathe. The foal lay still for a heart-stopping moment, then suddenly shuddered and took her first breath, her small rib cage expanding with the effort. A wave of relief washed over Amanda as the filly blinked, her eyes huge and dark in the dim light of the barn. She's beautiful, Grandfather Porter whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. And she was. As Hope continued to clean her, the foal's coat emerged, not the buckskin of her mother, but a rich, gleaming chestnut with a distinctive white blaze running down her face. Most striking of all was the perfect white star in the center of her forehead, shaped like a diamond. A chrome chestnut, a voice said from the doorway. Dr. Miller had arrived, his expression one of wonder as he took in the scene before him. With that diamond star and those white stockings, those are Starfire bloodlines. No wonder Griggs is interested. Starfire? Amanda asked, not taking her eyes off the miracle before her. Dr. Miller nodded slowly, setting down his bag. Starfire was one of the most successful quarter-horse stallions in the country about 5 years ago. His foals still sell for tens of thousands of dollars. If this filly is indeed his get, she's extremely valuable. As if sensing they were talking about her, the foal struggled to rise, her spindly legs splaying in all directions as she fought to find her balance. Hope nickered encouragingly, nudging her daughter with her nose. "What will you name her?" Grandfather Porter asked softly. Amanda watched as the filly finally managed to stand, wobbling precariously beside her mother, defying all odds just by existing. Like Hope, she had survived against the odds, been born into a world that might not have welcomed her, but for the intervention of love. "Diamond," Amanda said, the name coming to her heart. "Her name is Diamond." Dawn broke on December 26th with a pink-gold light that turned the snow-covered farm into a wonderland. Amanda, who had spent the night in the barn despite her grandfather's protests, woke from her doze on the hay bale to find Diamond nursing vigorously, her tiny tail swishing with contentment as she took her breakfast. Hope stood patient and proud, her eyes half closed in what looked remarkably like maternal bliss. "Good morning, new mama," Amanda whispered, her voice husky with emotion and lack of sleep. "Good morning, Diamond." At the sound of her voice, Hope's ears flicked forward, and she turned her head to regard Amanda with what could only be described as equine satisfaction. The mare looked different this morning, stronger, more confident, as if the successful birth of her foal had awakened something deep within her, some ancient knowledge that she was more than the sum of her past traumas. Dr. Miller had stayed until midnight, ensuring that Diamond was nursing properly and that Hope had passed the afterbirth without complications. Before leaving, he had drawn blood samples from both mother and foal. "I know someone who can do DNA testing," he'd explained to Amanda and her grandfather. "If Diamond really is Starfire's daughter, we'll need proof, especially if Griggs makes good on his threats." Now, in the quiet of the early morning, those threats seemed distant and unreal. How could anyone look at the miracle of this tiny life and think of ownership, of money, of legal claims? Diamond was perfect, from her gleaming chestnut coat to her impossibly long legs, from the distinctive white blaze running down her face to the 4 white stockings that made her look as if she were wearing formal evening wear. As Amanda watched, Diamond finished nursing and took a few experimental steps, her movements already more coordinated than they had been just hours ago. Her large, dark eyes regarded the world with innocent curiosity, and when she caught sight of Amanda, she actually trotted a few steps in her direction before skittering back to the safety of her mother's side. "She's going to be a friendly one," came Grandfather Porter's voice from the barn doorway. He was carrying 2 steaming mugs and a paper bag that Amanda could smell from across the barn, fresh cinnamon rolls, probably from Mrs. Wilson, who had promised to stop by this morning. "She's perfect," Amanda agreed, accepting the mug of hot chocolate gratefully. "How did Mrs. Wilson know already?" Grandfather Porter chuckled, lowering himself onto the hay bale beside her. "Small town. Dr. Miller mentioned it to his wife when he got home, who called Betty at the diner, who told Mrs. Wilson when she stopped for coffee on her way to early church service." He handed her a cinnamon roll. "Eat, you must be starving." Amanda hadn't realized how hungry she was until the sweet, spicy scent hit her nostrils. She devoured the roll in a few quick bites, then accepted a second one without protest. "So what happens now?" she asked between mouthfuls. "With Diamond, I mean, and Griggs." Her grandfather's expression grew thoughtful. "Well, first we wait for the DNA results. If Diamond is indeed Starfire's daughter, she could be very valuable, which means Griggs will have even more reason to pursue his claim." "But she's ours," Amanda protested, her voice rising slightly and causing Diamond to startle, pressing closer to Hope. "Sorry," she whispered to the foal before turning back to her grandfather. "We have the bill of sale for Hope. Doesn't that mean Diamond belongs to us too?" Generally, yes, the law typically recognizes that a foal belongs to the owner of the mare at the time of birth. But Griggs might try to claim that Hope was stolen from him, not sold, which would complicate things. But Mr. Bennett found proof that Griggs sold her at auction, and that will help our case enormously. Grandfather Porter placed a reassuring hand on Amanda's shoulder. "But we need to be prepared for a fight," Amanda rose. "Men like Griggs don't give up easily, especially when there's money involved." The peaceful mood of the morning had evaporated, replaced by a familiar anxiety that settled in Amanda's stomach like a cold stone. She looked at Diamond, now curled up in the straw beside Hope, her delicate legs tucked beneath her, her small sides rising and falling with the deep breaths of sleep. "I won't let him take her," Amanda said quietly, a fierce determination hardening her voice. "Either of them." Grandfather Porter studied her for a long moment, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "I know you won't, and neither will I." The rest of the day passed in a blur of visitors. First came the Wilsons, bearing more food and excited to see the new foal. Mrs. Wilson took dozens of photographs, declaring Diamond the most beautiful filly I've ever seen in 50 years of raising horses. Mr. Wilson spoke quietly with Grandfather Porter near the barn door, their expression serious, though they smiled whenever Amanda glanced their way. Sarah and her parents arrived next, followed by several neighbors who had heard the news. By mid-afternoon, it seemed half the county had stopped by to admire Diamond and congratulate Amanda. Throughout it all, Hope remained remarkably calm, allowing the visitors to admire her foal from a respectful distance, trusting Amanda to ensure no one came too close. "She knows you're protecting them," Sarah whispered, as they watched Diamond attempt to prance around the stall, her legs still not quite coordinating properly. "Hope, I mean. Look how she watches you." It was true. The mare's eyes followed Amanda constantly, her ears swiveling to track the girl's movements, her posture relaxing whenever Amanda was nearby. The bond between them, forged through those difficult early weeks, had deepened into something profound and unshakable. As evening approached and the last of the visitors departed, Amanda and her grandfather worked together to clean the stall, providing fresh straw and water. Diamond watched the activity with bright-eyed interest, occasionally venturing a few steps toward Amanda before darting back to Hope's side. "She's curious about you," Grandfather Porter observed, pausing in his work. "Why don't you try sitting quietly? See if she'll approach on her own." Amanda settled cross-legged in the clean straw, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Hope nickered softly, as if encouraging her foal, and after a moment's hesitation, Diamond took a tentative step toward Amanda, then another. Her tiny hooves made almost no sound on the straw as she approached, her neck extended, nostrils flared to catch Amanda's scent. Time seemed to stop as the filly drew closer, her large, dark eyes fixed on Amanda's face. When she was just inches away, Diamond stretched out her delicate muzzle and touched Amanda's outstretched hand, her breath warm and soft against the girl's skin. The touch lasted only a moment before Diamond wheeled away, kicking up her heels in a display of newfound energy that made both Amanda and her grandfather laugh out loud. But that brief connection, the first voluntary contact initiated by the foal, felt like a promise, a beginning. Later that night, as Amanda reluctantly prepared to return to the house for dinner, her phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Miller. "DNA samples safely delivered to lab, results in 3 to 5 days. How are our girls doing?" Amanda smiled, typing back a quick update as Grandfather Porter waited patiently by the barn door. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, she couldn't help but feel that, despite the uncertainty hanging over them, the threat of Griggs, the question of Diamond's lineage, the challenges that still lay ahead, something fundamental had shifted. Hope had given birth not just to a foal, but to new hope for all of them. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The days following Diamond's birth fell into a new rhythm. Amanda divided her time between school, her regular chores, and the countless hours spent in the barn, watching in wonder as the filly grew stronger by the day. Diamond's personality emerged with startling speed. Curious, spirited, and increasingly bold, she explored every corner of her stall, tested the limits of her mother's patience, and gradually became more comfortable with human contact. "She's a quick study," Grandfather Porter remarked on the fourth morning, leaning against the stall door as Diamond cautiously accepted a scratch behind the ears from Amanda, just like her mother. Hope stood nearby, alert but relaxed, her trust in Amanda now extending to include Grandfather Porter as well. The mare's physical transformation continued to amaze everyone who had known her condition in October. Her coat now gleamed with health, her eyes were bright and engaged, and though still lean from nursing her foal, her body had filled out with proper nutrition and care. New Year's Eve arrived with no word from the laboratory about Diamond's DNA test. Amanda tried not to worry, reminding herself that the holidays had likely slowed the process. She and her grandfather celebrated quietly at home, toasting the new year with sparkling cider as they sat before the fireplace. "What do you think this year will bring?" Grandfather Porter asked, his weathered face soft in the firelight. Amanda considered the question carefully. "I hope it brings resolution," she said finally. "I want Hope and Diamond to be safe, really safe, without having to worry about Griggs or anyone else trying to take them away." Her grandfather nodded thoughtfully. "A worthy wish. And knowing you, Amanda Rose, you'll find a way to make it happen." The laboratory results arrived on January 2nd, delivered personally by Dr. Miller, who came to the farm as soon as his morning appointments were finished. Amanda was in the barn, introducing Diamond to the concept of a halter, not putting it on yet, just letting the filly sniff and investigate the unfamiliar object when the veterinarian's truck pulled into the yard. One look at Dr. Miller's face told Amanda everything she needed to know. "It's confirmed, isn't it?" she asked as the veterinarian entered the barn, shaking snow from his boots. "Diamond is Starfire's daughter." Dr. Miller nodded, removing a manila envelope from his coat pocket. 99.9% probability of paternity. There's no question. Diamond carries Starfire's bloodlines. Grandfather Porter, who had come in from the workshop when he heard Dr. Miller arrive, accepted the envelope with a grave expression. "What does this mean for us, practically speaking?" "It means Diamond is potentially very valuable," Dr. Miller explained, watching as the filly in question pranced around her mother, showing off for their visitor. "Starfire's last foals sold at auction went for upwards of $25,000, and that was for colts with less impressive conformation than your filly. A well-trained mare with these bloodlines and Diamond's physical characteristics could easily be worth twice that or more." The figures made Amanda's head spin. She had known, in an abstract way, that Diamond might be valuable, but hearing concrete numbers brought the reality home with stunning force. The money her grandfather had invested in Hope's care, the vet bills, the special feed, the medications, suddenly seemed insignificant compared to what Diamond might be worth someday. "And Griggs knows this," Grandfather Porter stated rather than asked, his voice heavy. Dr. Miller's expression confirmed it. "He's been making inquiries around the county, talking to breeders, asking about DNA testing. It's only a matter of time before he makes his move." As if summoned by their conversation, the distant sound of an engine broke the winter stillness. Through the barn window, Amanda could see a now familiar black truck approaching, followed by a sheriff's patrol car. "That's Griggs," she said, her voice tight with sudden fear. "And Sheriff Davis." Hope, sensing Amanda's distress, moved closer to her. positioning herself between the girl and the barn door. Diamond, picking up on the tension, pressed against her mother's side, her playfulness suddenly subdued. "Stay here with the horses," Grandfather Porter instructed, his tone brooking no argument. "Dr. Miller and I will handle this." Amanda wanted to protest, to insist on facing Griggs herself, but the protective stance of her grandfather and the veterinarian silenced her objections. Instead, she wrapped an arm around Hope's neck, drawing comfort from the mare's solid presence as she watched the two men walk out to meet the approaching vehicles. Through the barn window, Amanda could see Griggs exit his truck, a smug expression on his gaunt face. Sheriff Davis, a stocky man with a salt and pepper mustache, approached more cautiously, nodding a greeting to Grandfather Porter and Dr. Miller. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, the body language spoke volumes, Griggs gesturing emphatically, Sheriff Davis remaining professionally neutral, Grandfather Porter standing firm with arms crossed over his chest. At one point, Dr. Miller handed something to the sheriff. The DNA results, Amanda guessed, which the lawman studied with furrowed brows. The discussion continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. Finally, Sheriff Davis handed the papers back to Dr. Miller and said something that made Griggs's face darken with anger. The tall man jabbed a finger in the direction of the barn, his posture aggressive enough that Amanda instinctively tightened her hold on Hope. Just then, another vehicle appeared on the driveway, Mr. Bennett's silver sedan, moving at an uncharacteristically high speed for the cautious banker. He parked hurriedly and jogged to join the group, carrying a leather portfolio under his arm. The new arrival seemed to shift the dynamic of the conversation. Mr. Bennett opened his portfolio, showing documents to Sheriff Davis, while Griggs grew increasingly agitated. When the banker produced what appeared to be a thick stack of photographs, Griggs actually took a step back, his confidence visibly faltering. After another few minutes of discussion, Sheriff Davis turned to Griggs and said something that made the tall man's shoulders slump in defeat. With a final glare toward the barn, Griggs stomped back to his truck, slammed the door, and drove away, gravel spitting from beneath his tires. Amanda released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding, feeling Hope do the same beside her. Even Diamond seemed to understand that a threat had passed, giving a little buck and kick that under other circumstances would have made Amanda laugh. The barn door opened and Grandfather Porter entered, followed by Dr. Miller and Mr. Bennett, all three men wearing expressions of cautious relief. "What happened?" Amanda asked, stepping away from Hope to meet them. "Is it over?" "Not entirely," Grandfather Porter said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But we've won the first round," Mr. Bennett explained, setting his portfolio on a hay bale. "I've spent the past week gathering evidence about Griggs's breeding operation. What I found isn't pretty. Documentation of neglect, tax evasion, fraud. He's been passing off ordinary foals as starfires get for years, collecting premium prices for horses with no valuable bloodlines. The sheriff warned him that pursuing a claim on Diamond would open him up to a full investigation," Dr. Miller added. "Given what John has uncovered, that's the last thing Griggs wants." "So he's giving up?" Amanda asked, hope rising in her chest. The men exchanged glances. "For now," Grandfather Porter said carefully. "But men like Griggs don't surrender easily when there's money involved. He'll be back one way or another." "Then we'll be ready," Amanda declared, a new determination hardening her voice. She turned to look at Hope and Diamond, the two horses who had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. "They're ours, and they're staying that way." As if understanding her words, Diamond approached, pressing her velvety muzzle against Amanda's hand in a gesture of perfect trust. January melted into February, and winter maintained its grip on the Porter farm. Diamond grew with astonishing speed, her legs lengthening, her body developing the sleek muscled contours that hinted at the magnificent mare she would become. At 6 weeks old, she was already showing signs of her heritage. the distinctive way she carried her head, the fluid grace of her movement, the alert intelligence in her dark eyes. Amanda's science project had evolved into an extensive documentation of both Hope's recovery and Diamond's development. Ms. Reynolds, impressed by the thoroughness of Amanda's work, had suggested she consider entering it in the regional science fair in April. "You've created something special here," the teacher said, flipping through Amanda's meticulous notes and photographs. "This isn't just science. It's a story of compassion and determination that deserves to be shared." The idea both thrilled and terrified Amanda. On one hand, she was proud of what she had accomplished with Hope and Diamond. On the other, she worried that drawing attention to the valuable filly might somehow reach Griggs, reigniting his interest just when things had begun to settle down. When she expressed these concerns to her grandfather, he considered them thoughtfully before responding. "Hiding in the shadows isn't the answer, Amanda Rose," he said finally. "If Diamond is as special as we believe she is, people will notice eventually. Better to establish her story, our story, publicly and honestly, than to let Griggs or anyone else control the narrative." His words resonated with something deep inside Amanda, a conviction that had been growing steadily since Christmas night when Diamond entered the world. These horses weren't just animals to be owned. They were living beings with their own stories, their own dignity. The world should know who they really were, not as commodities to be bought and sold, but as survivors whose journey mattered. "I'll do it," she decided, a new sense of purpose filling her, "and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly where Hope and Diamond came from and what they've overcome." February brought another development. Mr. Wilson approached Amanda and her grandfather with an unexpected proposal. The experienced horseman had been watching Diamond's growth with a professional eye, recognizing potential that went beyond even her impressive bloodlines. "That filly has natural talent," he said one snowy afternoon, as they watched Diamond performing self-invented dressage movements in the paddock, her small body already showing the coordination and balance of a much older horse. With the right training, she could compete at the highest levels. Amanda's heart leaped at the words, though she tried to temper her excitement with realism. "I don't know anything about professional training, Mr. Wilson, and we can't afford—" "That's my proposal," the rancher interrupted gently. "Let me help train Diamond. My competing days are behind me, but I know what it takes. In return, when she's ready, we can share whatever winnings she might earn." The offer was generous, almost unbelievably so. Amanda looked to her grandfather, who was studying Mr. Wilson with an expression of cautious consideration. "Why would you do this, Henry?" Grandfather Porter asked directly. "Diamond's potential aside, it's a significant investment of your time and expertise." Mr. Wilson smiled, his weathered face creasing with genuine warmth. "Partly because I believe in that filly, but mostly because I believe in your granddaughter." He turned to Amanda. "Not many 12-year-olds would have done what you did, putting every penny you had into saving a horse everyone else had given up on. That kind of heart deserves support." Tears pricked at Amanda's eyes, and she blinked them back rapidly. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I'd be honored to learn from you." The training began in small, age-appropriate ways, teaching Diamond to accept a halter, to lead properly, to stand quietly for grooming. Amanda absorbed Mr. Wilson's instructions like a sponge, practicing with Diamond daily, establishing the foundations that would carry them forward into more advanced work when the filly was older. Hope watched these sessions with what Amanda swore was maternal pride, standing at the paddock fence with pricked ears, nickering encouragement when Diamond mastered a new skill. The mare's own training had progressed as well. Though she would never be completely free of the physical and emotional scars from her past, she had learned to trust, to enjoy human companionship, to find pleasure in the simple routines of farm life. "You've given her a new life," Sarah commented one Saturday as the girls sat on the paddock fence, watching Hope and Diamond play a game of equine tag, racing around the enclosure with joyful abandon. Both of them, really. Amanda considered this, watching the horses she loved with a full heart. "I think they've given me just as much," she replied softly. The peaceful rhythm of their lives was disrupted in early March when Sheriff Davis arrived at the farm one afternoon, his expression grave. Amanda was in the barn with Hope and Diamond when her grandfather called her to the house, his voice carrying an unusual tension that made her hurry across the yard. Sheriff Davis stood in their kitchen, hat in hands, looking uncomfortable. "I thought you should hear this directly from me," he said once Amanda was seated at the table. "Harlan Griggs was arrested yesterday in Tullerton County. He tried to sell a yearling colt he claimed was Starfire's get to an undercover officer from the State Agricultural Fraud Division." Amanda's stomach clenched. "What does that mean for us, for Diamond?" "The investigation has uncovered evidence that Griggs engaged in widespread fraud," the sheriff continued. "He kept detailed records, names, dates, bloodlines, of every horse he claimed was sired by Starfire. Hope is on that list." Grandfather Porter leaned forward, his expression intense. "And the real sire?" Sheriff Davis consulted a notepad. "According to Griggs's records, Hope was bred to Starfire legitimately. She's one of the few mares that actually was. But when she became ill during pregnancy, Griggs decided she wasn't worth the veterinary care. He planned to sell her, then retrieve the foal after it was born, passing it off as being from a different mare entirely. The calculated cruelty of it, discarding Hope like trash while planning to profit from her foal, made Amanda's blood run cold. That's evil," she whispered. Sheriff Davis nodded grimly. "Griggs will be facing multiple charges, including animal cruelty and fraud. The state's building a strong case. His victims include some wealthy, influential people who paid top dollar for horses with falsified bloodlines." "Will he go to prison?" Amanda asked, voicing the question uppermost in her mind. "That's up to the courts, but given the scope of the fraud and the animal cruelty charges, it's likely." Sheriff Davis replaced his hat. "I just wanted you to know that his threat to your horses should be effectively neutralized. His assets have been frozen pending investigation, and he won't be breeding or selling horses for a very long time, if ever again." After the sheriff left, Amanda sat in stunned silence, processing the news. Grandfather Porter placed a mug of hot chocolate before her, his own face reflecting the tumult of emotions she felt. "It's over?" she asked finally, looking up at him. "Really over?" He considered the question carefully before answering. "The threat from Griggs specifically? Yes, I believe it is, but Diamond's value remains, and that will always attract attention, not all of it welcome. Our job is to protect her, to raise her right, to make sure she has the life she deserves, the life both she and Hope deserve." Amanda nodded slowly, her thoughts turning to the horses waiting in the barn, unaware of how their futures had just been secured. "I'm going to tell them," she said, rising from her chair. "They should know they're safe now." Grandfather Porter smiled, understanding perfectly. "Yes, they should. And so should you." Amanda rose. "So should you." 3 years passed like the changing seasons, each one bringing new growth, new challenges, and new joys to the Porter farm. Amanda, now 15, had blossomed from the determined 12-year-old who had spent her last penny on a dying mare into a confident young horsewoman respected throughout the county for her gentle training methods and unwavering dedication. Diamond, at 3 years old, had fulfilled every promise of her bloodlines and more. Standing 16 hands high, her chestnut coat gleamed like burnished copper in the summer sun, and her movement was poetry in motion, powerful, graceful, with a natural collection that made experienced trainers stop and stare. The white diamond-shaped star on her forehead had given her name seemed almost prophetic now, as the filly had indeed become a precious gem. her value measured not just in dollars, but in the hearts she had touched. Hope, now 8, had settled into the role of beloved matriarch of the Porter farm. Though Amanda had initially worried that Diamond's growing fame might make Hope seem less special to outsiders, the opposite had proven true. Hope's story, the neglected mare who had survived against all odds, given birth to an exceptional filly, and helped a young girl find her purpose, had become something of a legend in equestrian circles, a testament to the power of compassion and second chances. On this particular June morning, Amanda stood at the paddock fence watching Diamond work with Mr. Wilson in the round pen. The filly, though Amanda supposed she should start calling her a mare now, was practicing flying lead changes, switching from one lead to another in mid-canter with a smoothness that made the complex movement look effortless. "She's something else," Grandfather Porter said, joining Amanda at the fence. At 71, he moved a bit slower these days, but remained as sharp and observant as ever. "Ready for the big show next weekend?" Amanda nodded, though butterflies fluttered in her stomach at the thought. The upcoming Summer Classic would be Diamond's first major competition, an event that would put her before some of the most discerning eyes in the quarter horse world. They had attended smaller local shows over the past year, bringing home ribbons and trophies that now lined the walls of the tack room, but this was different. This was stepping onto a bigger stage. "Mr. Wilson says she's more than ready," Amanda replied. "And I think he's right. Diamond loves to perform. It's like she knows when people are watching and wants to show off." Grandfather Porter chuckled. "Gets that from her mother." They both glanced over to where Hope grazed peacefully nearby, keeping a maternal eye on her daughter's training session. Hope always did have a flair for the dramatic. Remember how she used to prance around the paddock when we had visitors? The memory made Amanda smile. Those early days after Diamond's birth, when they had lived under the shadow of Griggs's threats, seemed distant now. The horse broker had eventually been sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and animal cruelty, his breeding operation dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The horses he had neglected, including several mares like Hope, had been rescued and rehomed through a statewide effort that Amanda had participated in, sharing her experience and knowledge with other young rescuers. Mr. Wilson ended the training session, giving Diamond an affectionate pat before leading her out of the round pen. The mare immediately headed for Amanda, nuzzling her shoulder in greeting. "She was perfect today," Mr. Wilson reported, his face glowing with the pride of a teacher whose student has exceeded all expectations. "I honestly believe she's ready for national competition, not just regional." The words sent a thrill of both excitement and anxiety through Amanda. National competition meant travel, expenses, and exposure far beyond anything they had contemplated. It also meant opportunities for Diamond to be recognized among the elite, for Amanda to establish herself in the equestrian world, for their story to reach and inspire even more people. "Let's see how she does at the Classic first," Grandfather Porter suggested, always the voice of practicality. "One step at a time." That evening, as Amanda completed her barn chores, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. She had been a child with 87/53 and a dream of saving one unwanted horse. Now she stood on the brink of a future she could never have imagined, with opportunities opening before her like blossoms unfurling in the sun. Her reverie was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah, who now spent almost as much time at the Porter farm as Amanda did. The girls had remained best friends, their bond strengthened by shared experiences and mutual support through the challenges of adolescence. "Mom sent apple pie," Sarah announced, holding up a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "She said you'd need brain food for your big planning session." The planning session was their final strategy meeting before the Summer Classic. Amanda, Grandfather Porter, Mr. Wilson, and Sarah, who had taken on the role of Diamond's groom with enthusiasm and surprising skill, They gathered around the kitchen table, enjoying Mrs. Bennett's pie while reviewing the competition schedule, discussing final preparations, and addressing last-minute concerns. "The trailer's been completely serviced," Grandfather Porter reported. "New tires, brakes checked, everything in top condition for the trip. Diamond's show halter is polished, and her mane and tail are conditioned," Sarah added. "I've been practicing those fancy braids Mr. Wilson showed me." Mr. Wilson nodded approvingly. "The entry forms are confirmed. We're in 3 classes: halter, showmanship, and Western pleasure. It's a good start for her first major show." Amanda listened to these preparations with a mixture of excitement and humility. So many people had invested in her dream, supported her when others might have dismissed her as just a child with an impractical notion. Their belief in her had made all of this possible. "I don't know how to thank all of you," she said suddenly, emotion making her voice catch. "For everything you've done. For me, for Hope, for Diamond." "Oh, honey," Sarah's mother said from the doorway where she had arrived with a forgotten item from the basket. "Don't you see? You've given us all something special too. Hope and Diamond's story. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected places." The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect early summer day. Amanda rose with the sun, eager to spend time with Hope and Diamond before the busy day of preparations began. In the pasture, she found them together, Hope standing protectively near her daughter as always, Diamond gleaming in the golden light as if she had been polished by the sun itself. As Amanda approached, both horses lifted their heads, ears pricked forward in greeting. Diamond trotted over first, her movement so fluid it seemed her hooves barely touched the ground. Hope followed at a more dignified pace, her once dull eyes now bright with contentment and trust. Amanda wrapped an arm around each horse's neck, drawing them close in a 3-way embrace that had become their special ritual. Standing there between them, feeling their steady heartbeats, their warm breath, their unwavering trust, she knew with absolute certainty that no matter what honors Diamond might win in the show ring, no matter what achievements might lie in their future, nothing would ever be more valuable than this: the love between a girl and 2 horses who had saved each other in all the ways that truly mattered. "Ready for our next adventure?" she whispered. Hope and Diamond, as if understanding perfectly, pressed closer in silent affirmation. Together they turned to face the rising sun, 3 survivors whose shared journey had only just begun.